want to take a moment to talk about media literacy. Media literacy basically means how are we consuming the media effectively, right? Are we reading or watching or listening to the news in a way that allows us to get something out of it? And we've got to ask ourselves, how do we do this? How do we become more media literate? And one good way to do this is to identify biases, partisan biases, but also other biases, and to question them. That doesn't mean we can't consume biased news, but we should know that there's a bias there. So if you watch a lot of Fox News, think, okay, but this is a conservative slant on the news. So am I getting the full story? If you watch a lot of MSNBC, you got to think to yourself, there's a liberal slant on this news. Am I getting the full story? Is there another side to this? Are there multiple other sides to this, right? Not everything has two sides. And we should know to question that. We should also think the story is about a woman or a minority. Is it being presented in a biased way? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but we should think about it and question it. And also consider, are there stories that aren't being told? That's a really hard thing to think about, right? Like, how do you know what you don't know? How do you know that there's something that you're not being told? But we should at least question that and consider that. We should also know how to identify quality and how to question sources. So when we're consuming the news, is it a news report or is it an opinion or editorial, right? Is it something that is trying to report the facts? Maybe the facts are being reported in a biased manner, but it's still just reporting the facts. Or is it something where someone's telling you what they think about it to try to persuade you to think the same way, presumably? So how do you know what's opinion and what's not? Some things are going to be upfront about it. For example, most newspapers will have the news section and opinion sections. But sometimes it's a little blurry what's what. Now, also, is the news that's being reported even just factually correct? Are they making mistakes? And are these mistakes innocent mistakes? Sometimes that happens in the heat of the moment. That's why libel laws are written to protect the press from those kind of things. You make a mistake in the moment, you say something that turns out is untrue, but in the moment you really thought it wasn't. It was a breaking news story and you had to run with it. That's often protected. But is it just a flat out lie, right? How do we know if news is being made up or not? And we can find a lot on the internet that can help guide us. Things like this media bias chart, which both of these show partisan bias, and then the one on my left, I'm not sure how it ends up on Zoom. I assume it must be your left because the writing is forward. Duh. So on your left as well, that media bias chart show with the sort of like inverted U, that shows not only partisan skew, left-right skew, but also how much is just sort of fact-based reporting and versus how much is more opinion and skewed in that way, and how much just ends up becoming sort of made up. So you can get an idea from those. And you can get an idea by researching a source. If you come across a source that you've never used before, Google it and see, okay, who owns this source? What are their biases and motivations? What is going on here? So we can often do our own research on the news sources and maybe even on the news stories to get a full picture. Now, that can be hard. That can be time consuming. So it's not necessarily an easy thing to do, but at least if we are aware that this is something that we may want to do and we may need to do sometimes, just that awareness that we might not be getting the full picture can help us consume media and the news media, especially, more responsibly.